Hey, quick heads up before we get started. If you're a fan of Psycho Pass, you're gonna want to stick around until the end of this video, because I'm gonna be giving away some PS4 codes for the new Psycho Pass visual novel, Mandatory Happiness. And I'm gonna be unboxing the game's Slick Collector's Edition. And why would you not be a fan of Psycho Pass? It's possibly the finest work of anime cyberpunk fiction since Ghost in the Shell, and it was made by that guy who only made good things up until that stopped being true. But if you haven't seen the show yet, it just became available to watch on Crunchyroll thanks to their new Funimation partnership, and you can watch it ad-free in HD if you use the URL crunchyroll.com/basement to sign up for a 14-day free trial. Plus, if you do that before September 30th, you'll be entered to win a trip to Japan for you and a friend. This is your lucky week when it comes to potentially getting free stuff, and my lucky week when it comes to shilling. Psycho Pass is expertly directed and tackles a lot of big ideas in a very deft manner, so you'd think its OP would be ripe for analysis. And it is, but only really the second one. The first is more of a tone piece than anything else, and it's not nearly as deep as the body of water that it's set in. Plus, the second OP has a lot more in the way of pretty colors, and you know how much I love those. But we open on a shot that's almost entirely devoid of color, save for the oversaturated blood leaking out of Shinya Kogami's bullet-riddled body. It's an interesting and ominous choice to start every episode of your show on a shot of one of the protagonists apparently lying dead, one that hints at just how beaten down Kogami will be by the end of the show's second act. The violent way that he responds is equally ominous, snapping out of his stupor only to fire at the camera with a revolver, cracking the lens. This is a striking image on its own, but it can also be taken to symbolize Kogami's eventual rejection of the ever-watchful Sybil system, represented by the camera. The camera could also represent Makishima Shogo, who largely sits outside society as an observer. Next, we see the agents of Division 1 lined up on the edge of a rooftop, staring down from on high as smoke billows up from the city. This smoke is probably coming from the riot started by Shogo toward the middle part of the season. While the rest of the squad is distracted by the chaos below, Kogami looks back toward the camera and Makishima Shogo, who uses the riot as a diversion while he attempts to take down the Sybil system in the show, and of course Kogami is the character who notices that and stops him. Shogo is carrying a bright red book that immediately draws the eye when set against his all-white body and the contrasting green smoke. The book, whose title were not shown, represents one of Shogo's defining character traits, that he is well-read and prone to quoting philosophers. The first shot that we see of him hints at his elusive nature. The second establishes the threat that he poses. He cuts an imposing figure, towering over us as we look up from a low angle. The third shot, where we finally see his face, is pretty dense with meaning. We see Makishima walk straight through the crosshairs of the Sybil system without a care in the world, his criminally asymptomatic brain making it impossible for the system to judge him. But there's a secondary meaning here as well. Consider the shot from another perspective. It shows Makishima inside the Sybil system itself, and as we learn toward the end of the series, the Sybil system is comprised entirely of asymptomatic brains like his. Yet another example of a twist hiding in plain sight in the OP. Next, we see Akane stumbling through the spinning silhouette of a crumbling jigsaw puzzle, representing everything that she thinks she knows about the world and the Sybil system coming undone. We see Kogami through a similar window, but he strides forward confidently, in the opposite direction of where Akane was going. The split between the two characters is further emphasized by the difference in their coloration. Akane is shown in red, running through a world of light turquoise, while Kogami is all white, walking through a world of dark red and casting a turquoise shadow. Color in the Psycho Pass universe is rarely ever just color. It's a direct representation of a person's mental state. Darker colors, like this red, denote anger and potential violence, while lighter colors, such as turquoise, which is noted in the show to be Akane's hue, show a clear, calm mind. So when Kogami casts a turquoise shadow, this could be indicative of his role as an enforcer, to act as a buffer between Akane and the more psychologically damaging elements of the world. But as it's noted in the show, Akane understands the true nature of the world around her and is able to accept that without letting it affect her. which I think is the meaning of her red coloration here. That's just my interpretation though, they never really clarify most of what the hues mean, except for one. A mind that is absolutely clear, or one existing outside the bounds of the system, is pure white. We see two people rendered in this shade in the OP, Kogami and Makishima, who both end up working outside the Sibyl system, and who both have fundamentally similar minds. We cut from Kogami walking to a brief shot of a Dominator flowing through a microscopic bloodstream. Both OPs place heavy emphasis on this particular visual metaphor. In fact, in the first OP, all of the blood that we see is in cell form, which is an oddly clinical way of viewing blood in a series that's this brutal and gory. This particular shot emphasizes the Dominator's intended role in society, as an antibody of sorts against infections of the mind. Akane is shown flailing as she falls away and the color fades out of the world around her. This is the moment when her Dominator first fails to work and she starts to lose faith in the Sibyl system. In the stark, white world without it, she feels lost. Kogami, meanwhile, is unshaken as he drives resolutely onward to catch Makishima. As he does, he leaves a trail of pink smoke behind him for Akane and the rest of the inspectors to follow. The city below the highway is shown submerged in murky water, hinting at the problems below the surface of Psycho-Pass's dystopia. As the camera pans around, a building obscures Kogami's car entirely, and we cut to a brief shot of him slumped, smoking, surrounded by the fallen bodies of his fellow enforcers. Note that Ginoza, who becomes an enforcer at the end of the series, is among them. Kogami is shown clumsily running around within the silhouette of a Dominator, under the eyes of the Sibyl system, and then we see him sparking up a cigarette. We see Kogami smoking a lot in this OP, and we see many of the enforcers smoke throughout the series. Cigarettes represent a loose form of control for these characters, both in their obvious ability to regulate moods, and in their role as one of the few unhealthy things that people can still choose to do under Sibyl. The image of a cigarette burning down quickly also resembles a fuse about to go off. After lighting his smoke, Kogami tosses away his Dominator. Zooming into it, we see a pair of floating eyeballs, the same eyes that Makishima steals in order to circumvent the pre-Sibyl security system in the farming complex and enact his final master plan. In other words, we go from one security vulnerability to another. The midsection of the OP is taken up by an extended shot of Kogami in a heated fistfight with himself, representing both his internal struggle between upholding the law and meting out actual justice, and his conflict with the uncomfortably similar Shogo Makishima. With a brutal hook, we're brought into a shot of Division 1 taking aim, specifically the three detectives from Division 1 who end up actually confronting Makishima at the agriculture complex. Then we're hit with a double whammy of symbols. Two arms, pink and blue, reach out to grab each other, but instead pass through, blending into yellow. And I can't for the life of me figure out what it's supposed to be referencing. Maybe Ginoza losing his arm like his father does? I don't know, I think I might have missed something here. The next one is a little easier though. The Chief's Rubik's Cube falling into a pool of blood. The blood represents the functioning society created by the Sibyl system, and the Chief is revealed to simply be an avatar of that system, so it makes sense that she would be immersed in it. From there, a Dominator in Paralyzer mode fires, hitting Kogami's silhouette as he attempts to dodge. Yet, as it hits, the shot erupts into a fountain of blood. That's not supposed to happen. The prospect of hurting Kogami clearly worries Akane. Also, gosh dang, I love this transition and the flyby animation that follows. We zip past Makishima, standing calmly between the two shooters, still holding his book, to Kogami, who is holding his revolver instead of a Dominator. As an archaic weapon that makes no moral judgment on its own, the revolver represents an absolute rejection of the Sibyl system. And it's the revolver that fires, leaving no doubt in our minds, no matter how much we might hope for Kogami's redemption, of how Makishima will meet his end. To punctuate that point, we see the tip blown off Kogami's cigarette, his patience reaching an abrupt end. Things slow down considerably for the final sequence, which focuses on a single, slow, dramatic moment of Division 1 striding forward behind a fence, all heading toward the tower that houses Sibyl. Kogami walks on the other side of the fence, separated from his squad mates. As Makishima emerges from the smoke, this is further emphasized. The rest of Division 1 continues forward, while Kogami stares back in the opposite direction, his eyes locked on Makishima. He and Akane walk past each other, and she stares forward resolutely. But when Kogami's face emerges from the shadows and is finally colored in, we see him looking back at her for a moment, hesitating about how he'll handle Makishima before his gaze shifts back to us. And then the title card happens. This OP goes out of its way to emphasize one thing: that Psycho Pass is, thematically speaking, all about the three-way conflict between Akane, Makishima, and Kogami. Something that might, hypothetically speaking, be very prominently missing from the second season, if it existed, which it doesn't. It also goes out of its way to look and sound stylish as all heck. The simplified color scheme may or may not tie into the hue system, but it looks damn pretty, and the theme song, Out of Control by Nothing's Carved in Stone, kicks 8 different kinds of ass. And the new video game, Psycho Pass Mandatory Happiness, kicks a roughly equivalent quantity of posterior. And just to be clear, I have not been sponsored to say that. Nice America, the game's publisher, only provided me with some promo codes to give away for the game. I haven't been paid for this video in any way. In fact, I bought this special edition on my own just because I love Psycho Pass that much. The special edition comes in a super pretty stylized box packed with a soundtrack CD, a microfiber cloth, and pencil boards, and a really nice art book with quotes from the game's cast, development materials, and a ton of slick illustrations. Unfortunately, it's almost all sold out, but the regular edition is still quite fun. It takes place during the first, only season of the show, and does a lot to flesh out the world of Psycho Pass, which, if you're a world-building nerd like I am, is really cool. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, you should check out that video over there. It's a little bare bones as visual novels go, so I don't know if I'd recommend it to you if you're not into them already, but if you are, it's solid. If you want to try the game for yourself, I've got 3 PS4 codes to give away to 3 lucky basement dwellers. All you've got to do to win is 1. Hit that like button, 2. Hit that subscribe button, and 3. Leave a comment below, possibly berating me for ripping off Philip DeFranco. And if you want one more chance to win, you can tweet the video out or share it on Facebook with the code MBPsycho, and you'll be entered a second time in the sweepstakes. That's how it works. I've explained it. That's what it does. You know how sweepstakes work. Hopefully. If you don't know how already, you can find me on Twitter at G0FF2 and on Facebook at facebook.com/mothersbasementofficial. Links in the doobly-doo. Also in the doobly-doo, you will find links to my Patreon page, where many awesome people, including the ones whose names you're seeing on screen right now, have decided to give me money every month to keep making this nonsense. I wouldn't be able to do it without your support, and I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that, especially considering that this month has been pretty slow for me in terms of delivering actual content. PAX was a lot more exhausting than I thought it would be, so sorry for the production delay, and thank you for understanding. And I love you. This is Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.